Welcome to the Planners Advocacy Network primer video on appropriations. In this webinar, I will go over the basics of the federal appropriations process, how it applies to the important work that the network does, and its effects on planning throughout the country. The appropriations process can be long and at times hard to follow. In this video, I will go over who the players are, how the process works, and the key subcommittee that has jurisdiction over transportation planning issues. Understanding the what, the who, and the why behind the annual appropriations process is the first step in making your advocacy more impactful. The appropriations process is the provision of funds through an annual appropriations act or a permanent law for federal agencies to make payments out of the Treasury for specified purposes. The formal federal spending process consists of two sequential steps: authorization and then appropriation. In other words, this means that every year Congress receives a budget and are tasked with allocating funds to government agencies for the next fiscal year. For fiscal year 2020, which begins on October 1st, the appropriations process occurs in 2019. Also, Congress does not have full appropriating power. They only have power over what are called discretionary spending areas. These are areas of the federal budget in which Congress can decide to give a certain amount. Mandatory funds go towards programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and paying off U.S. debt. There are two chambers of government that have oversight on the appropriations process: the executive branch and the legislative branch. In Congress, both the House and the Senate have jurisdiction and each have an appropriations committee. Every year, the president sends a proposed budget over to Congress. This is supposed to happen in early February, however, in recent years has been sent over sometime in the spring. The appropriations procedure in the legislative branch lies within the House and Senate appropriations committees. The appropriations package that is produced by Congress allocates how much money will go to certain departments, for example, FEMA, or to a specific program, for example, community development block grants. Both the House and Senate appropriations committees have identical subcommittees. These 12 subcommittees cover the range of governmental agencies that receive discretionary spending. The 12 subcommittees are Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration and related agencies, Commerce, Justice, Science and related agencies, Defense, Energy and Water Development, Financial Services and General Government, Homeland Security, Interior, Environment and related agencies, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education and related agencies, the legislative branch, military construction, Veterans Affairs and related agencies, state, foreign operations and related programs, and lastly, transportation, housing and urban development and related agencies. Each of these 12 subcommittees on both the House and Senate side produce their own appropriations bill and decide how to distribute money to the agencies and programs where they have jurisdiction. The agency that receives the largest amount is Defense. For our purposes, the relevant subcommittee is the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and Related Agencies Subcommittee. Later in this video, I will go into greater detail on what jurisdiction the subcommittee has. As noted on the previous slide, the White House first sends a budget for the upcoming fiscal year to Congress. The second step is reviewing the budget in House and Senate budget committees. It is on these committees that Congress creates a budget via concurrent resolution. Concurrent resolutions do not need any presidential approval. The budget formed by Congress becomes the amount of money the House and Senate appropriations committees can allocate for the upcoming fiscal year. Traditionally, the House Appropriations Committee produces their package and then the Senate follows suit. Each of the 12 subcommittees creates their own bill that needs to pass the House and Senate. Once the appropriations bill passes through each chamber's committee, if there are any discrepancy, the House and Senate appropriations committees by law must come together to settle any differences in conference committee. However, if Congress cannot come to an agreement or cannot come to an agreement in a timely fashion on a subcommittee bill, Congress will produce an omnibus bill which consolidates the appropriated budget into one package. After conference committee, the bill must pass both the House and Senate and needs presidential approval. If the president vetoes the bill, like other forms of legislation, both chambers must pass the package by a 2/3 margin. If there is no signed appropriations bill, Congress can pass a continuing resolution, which is a joint resolution of Congress to allow federal agencies and programs to function while the appropriations process continues. If the appropriations package is not signed by October 1st, or if there's no continuing resolution, then the government goes into a shutdown. This has become a favorite approach of Congress in recent years. The key subcommittee for our purposes at APA, as we head into our August recess advocacy season, is the Transportation, Housing, Urban Development, and Related Agencies Subcommittee. The two largest agencies under this subcommittee's jurisdiction are the Department of Transportation and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, along with the programs and agencies that reside within the DOT and HUD. The House T-HUD subcommittee moved their version of the appropriations bill out of committee on June 4th of 2019. The bill, which includes robust funding for programs linked to transportation infrastructure and emphasize resiliency and safety, is a product of the work of planning advocates like you. Given the likelihood that appropriations bills will move to conference committee, these members will play a pivotal role in those discussions. The Senate T-HUD subcommittee is just beginning its appropriations work. Since the Senate is controlled by Republicans, there is a very high likelihood that its T-HUD appropriations bill will look different than the House's version. After August recess, expect for the Senate T-HUD subcommittee to release their version of the bill. Advocates play an important role in shaping the outcomes of this process. Believe it or not, elected officials take note when enough of their constituents tell them they want them to do something specific. In this case, urging your senators to support full funding for critical transportation programs could result in higher than normal budget numbers, despite the Republican-controlled Senate. If you would like to learn more about the appropriations process, we suggest you turn to two outside sources. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget has a great backgrounder on the current appropriations process. Also, Roll Call put out a great explainer video that shows how appropriations process is supposed to work and how in recent years there have been many delays and speed bumps. Appropriations is a very important process that Congress goes through every year. Advocates play a critical role in determining what agencies and programs get funding increases or decreases for the next year. As planners, your expertise can help educate members of Congress the importance of funding planning projects and the agencies that oversee planning through appropriations.